Welcome. Today I'm really excited to have an opportunity to talk with Azul-Valerie Thome from soulland.org. And Azul is doing wonderful work around grief, helping people to work with grief in communities. So this is a beautiful opportunity. Welcome, Azul. I'm so glad you're here to tell us a little bit more about your work.
Thank you, Jackie. This is a heartwarming conversation that we've already had, and really lovely to carry on. So the work I'm doing is part of Soulland. It's a bigger vision of making the world of our longing. One maturing soul at a time. It's quite a thing. And part of that is to do grief work, collective grief work. We call it, or I call it, the grief composting circles, because of the magic and alchemy of composting, how it transforms what perhaps we don't value so much and doesn't have so much value anymore into fertile material that can grow life again. And so from grief to love, and from death to life again, and on we go. Yeah, so grief composting circle are held monthly in Devon, in Dartington. We hold a sacred ritual, and it was inspired by Thome. I mean, do you want me to tell you more about the inspiration, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to give, I'm a little bit familiar with what you do because I've read a little bit, but other people watching might not know. So what led you to this work, your influences, all that sort of information is wonderful.
Wonderful. So it is a mycelium of connection and conversations. So the monthly grief composting circle has started in October 2015, after I did a very beautiful, intense grief ritual with Thome, who's from the Dagara people, and who shared with us that in her village there is a grief ritual every week for the well-being of the community. And it completely blew me away. My grief was immense about the poverty we live in, the soul poverty, and of course also the opportunities of making the world of our longing. And that's what keeps recurring for me is, yes, I feel the grief for what's not there, and there's so little there as far as what feeds our soul. And our creativity, imagination, and strength and courage is limitless. So we can create what we long for. And then I thought, wow, we're not African, I don't come from a lineage of Dagara people or Lakota people or, all these indigenous still having a sort of belonging, an obvious belonging to something that hasn't been forgotten. And that was tough. It was tough for me to feel this, that I belong to the tribe of the outcast or the exiled. That took me some time to recover from that. And then, but imagination is so strong. And she had planted a seed that I did not want to not care for and tend. So we started gradually in Devon, in the village hall. And it was based, so the learning, the ritual were based on something already that I had learned over the last 15 years with Joanna Macy, of her work called The Work That Reconnects, with the Truth Mandala and the spiral. And there's so much to say. So I'll introduce the third teacher, which really is embedded in the grief composting circle, is Francis Weller, who I have the honor of working closely with for the last 10 months. And that's we bring the 5 gates of grief into our work. So the Sobunfu is very much around the work with ancestors and the grief ritual, community, the change of culture, the mending of our connection with each other. And Joanna Macy is very much about the spiral, always basing all our work from gratitude. So that's really the foundation of all the work we do is from a place of love and gratitude. And that's where we return, to a place of love, gratitude, and belonging, and beauty, and rituals, which most of our species, much, 20,000 years. It's only recently we've stopped doing rituals. It's in our bones. It's in our deep time memory.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that sharing ritual and community is something that feeds our souls so very deeply. It's essential, I think.
Absolutely. It's one of the essential food for the soul, as well as singing and making beauty and dancing and being with the land and the waters and the skies and the trees and our family, our extended family. And us, you know, what Joanna Macy talks a lot about is how do we widen our circle of concern? How do we widen our circle of love? So, these are all our soul food, and you might have your own others. You know, we all have also what feeds our soul, which is included in the grief composting circle, and then in the training I will offer and talk about in a bit. It's earth art. So it's art infused with rituals, and that is informed by earth. For us to use our hands again, and through that, a deeper remembering of what capacity we have to create beauty and rituals and sacredness and connect to other beings and deepen and widen our conversations, not just with humans. Yeah.
And as you're describing the work, you know, some people might think that, you know, working actively with grief is something melancholic, but as you describe it, it just sounds so rich and creative, full of life. So it's just interesting, I think, because here in the West, I don't think we're very good at grief, and we shy away from it, and we don't necessarily work with it in a very active way. But it just sounds like that is the piece that you are bringing back to us here in the UK with the work that you're doing. You're somebody who's helping to make that available as a beautiful resource rather than something that we should be scared of or that we don't know how to engage with.
Yeah, and yeah, you say grief, we're not very good at it. I think we can be.
Yeah.
We can be. It's not, I keep saying that. I know I keep saying that, but I feel that we're not far from remembering.
Yeah.
It doesn't take long. It doesn't take much, you know, and so the grief, yes, you know, I don't know about you, but I've been educated to grieve alone, surrounded by isolation and shame. You know, I was brought up as a little girl to go and cry in my bedroom and not to make a fuss and stop having tantrum, or, you know, being shamed about crying because a tree was being killed, or all these feelings, these emotions. Being an emotional being was shamed, profoundly shamed. And when Sobunfu speaks, and you can hear her on YouTube as well, she says it's so crazy for them that we are grieving alone. They don't understand how such a collective experience is fractured into little bits, isolated in our rooms. And So I think what happened for me is I was also captivated, as I said again, by the beauty, by her immense community. And also, as we grieve together, we realize we share this pretty much the same grief. And it brings us together. It doesn't, shame feeds on isolation and feeds on negative beliefs about ourselves. And also she shame, it's a French, yeah, she's a she. And shame feeds on hidden and secrets. But when I see you grieving and you see me grieving, then we come together.
Yeah.
And that starves shame. Yeah. And part of grief rituals to me is to starve shame, because it's a dangerous ally. And personally, if I bring a personal thread, living in this world has been very intense for me. I've never understood where I belong, and never had very intense experience of depression, and was labeled in a very unimaginative way by like so many of us. And I had time in my life where I was highly medicated and institutionalized. It almost broke me forever, until gradually my soul, thank goodness for her, brought me with, some books, or Joanna Macy started feeding that, feeding my imagination that actually it wasn't the only way. Indigenous wisdom, starting to really learn about them. How do they see those mental crises, which are not a mental crisis? They are a soul crisis or spiritual crisis. They also to see that I didn't have any initiatory passage, like most of us. And gradually, I met Sabunfu in a very bad state. To be honest, I didn't know if I wanted to stay. And she brought the ancestors. Like, be in conversation with them. Change your relationship with your ancestors. They are so, I remember her words, and she died, 6 weeks ago. And I miss her, and I love this woman so dearly. And I remember her saying, they are so sorry for having given you such a hard time. And they are open to renegotiating the contract you have with them. I mean, how wonderful. How much more wonderful than being called bipolar or having psychotic episodes. I mean, I don't know if you've ever read books about all these other worlds. Has no imagination, no beauty. There's no empowerment. There's no colors. There's no seasons of the psyche. They don't talk that we have winters in our psyche as well as spring, summer, and autumn. They don't. They say, you feel intensely about life? Oh my goodness, you must be bipolar. So gradually meeting Francis Weller and reading his book. And I remember his sentence, depression, that so changed my life. Depression is when the soul refuses for you to go any further until you have expressed all your sorrow and grief. And I broke, and I went, at last, I'm meeting the people. I'm meeting my tribe.
Yeah.
I'm meeting my tribe. And I know I'm not alone. And one of my passion and what gives me strength to carry on, because it's not an easy work to do grief work. I think it chooses you rather than, it chose me, and it's not always easy.
Yeah.
But there's beauty in it. There is The more I do grief work, the more I see other people gathering to join the circles, the more we see our capacity for love.
Mm.
And the more we feel what it is to be truly alive.
Yeah.
Not be like zombies until we don't even die properly.
Yeah.
We're not even going to die properly.
Yeah.
And that's a motivation, I have to say. Sometimes my motivation is fear. It's all right. It's that I don't want to die, not even alive.
Mm.
I want to die alive.
Yeah.
And this work is about these four: grief, love, death, life.
Yeah.
In conversation with beauty and soul and rituals and connections and sharing our vulnerable, broken hearts. And how do we walk with a broken heart? You know, and yeah, I mean, I don't understand how we can be in this time without a broken heart.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. And it just feels so much to me that this is so needed for our times. And as you say, we're not so far away from, we're not so disconnected that we can't remember how to reconnect. And it just feels like this wonderful weaving in of the soul medicine that we need to feel completely human and connected to all aspects of ourselves, connected to the land and connected to our communities. And that's what we're missing. That's the bit that I think that many people feel is lacking. So it just feels like what you are offering with the grief composting circles offers a really beautiful way to bring all of that back into life again. What we're deeply yearning for without necessarily even knowing that it's that we're yearning for.
Yes, and you know, this community as well is the human community for sure, and we need to gather together. And the more we do this work, the more we also see how all the other beings that are sharing this planet with us, the more, you know, a big part of setting up the circles are to call and to ask for blessings and for the belonging with water and earth and air and animals and plants and fire and ancestors and all the living and the non-living. So because grief work is about container, creating a beautiful, sacred, supported, honored, and there's a whole weave of it's like making art in a way for the release of grief. And the grief, as we all know, is sometimes personal, and sometimes it's ancestral, sometimes it's the sorrow of our world, you know, which is impossible. And I say that really knowing that it's impossible to feel the pain of our world alone.
Yeah.
It would break us. We can't come back. We can't. It's too big. And so in our circle, we see that people are crying for rivers. They're crying for trees. They're crying. And then if we share the tears for this river, then we can come back to love much quicker and come back to creativity and use our imagination and moving forward and loving more.
Yeah.
And the circles are full now, and we have waiting lists. And there's a feeling of the mycelium. I talk about it a lot. I love mycelium, and the mycelium is growing, and people are, even the grief workers or grief tenders or grief composters, whatever we call us. There's more and more of us, and we're getting to find out about each other. So I'm offering this year for the first time a training for anyone interested in weaving together the work of Sobunfu Thome, of Joanna Macy, Francis Weller, of the work I have grown and developed with the Black Tent, and also earth art, which is to make those sacred objects that will provide maps and a support and a container for your individual and collective work. So it can be done as an altar or a shrine for your personal prayers and learning and remembering, also a collective for circles and organizations or groups or families, actually. You know, some families are now starting to do grief rituals.
Wow.
Which is so beautiful, so beautiful. One of the women who came to our circle, she said she brought it back to her family. And then they have a weekly, wow. And they create a sacred space, and the children are involved. Oh, so wonderful, so wonderful. Yeah.
So the people that come to the grief circles, the composting circles that you hold, what sort of things do they experience? What are they finding the benefits to be of connecting in community to do this grief composting?
Yeah, we just did one last Sunday, and it was heartwarming to read some of the comments. One of the women there said it was the most extraordinary experience of her life. And what she experienced is a homecoming of the different parts of herself. And what she was referring to is the child in her, the little girl in her, was shamed in her grief. Nobody understood. Nobody, and during the circle, she understood that this was not just her own, that all of us share this. I mean, it's difficult to paraphrase her own words because I don't want to dishonor it, but it was that part of her, the one that grieved for the world, the one that grieved because part of her she didn't love very much, and it wasn't very loved when she was a child. And those parts we send into outcast. They become outcast. They're scattered around. Yeah. And, either we dump them on others or we feel like we walk around with holes everywhere. Yeah. I don't know if you see what I'm saying. I feel that often. And so she said it was the most extraordinary homecoming. And other people say that they realize their grief is shared with so many others. And that their tears are honored and sacred. And also what we're realizing more and more together is that if I hold a grief circle for you or for us, and you grieve, you are doing work for us all. But not only for the humans. What is realized is that imagine if, let's say, someone who's going to ravage the rainforest does grief work, and that every time he or she cuts a tree, she feels it. Stop. Yeah. So what they experience is a return home. They've talked about it a lot. Connection to other beings, connection to us, themselves, connection to each other. And their heart opens. The love and the feeling after the circles. Oh, that last Sunday was extraordinary. People arrived quite closed and it's really burdened. And then the quality of the connections and the love and the heartfelt, soulful, quality of the space is beautiful. And people are coming back. Yeah. So and they're bringing their partners. And, we had many men last time, which was wonderful. We honored them deeply. Because, of course, that's another whole subject about men don't cry. How damaging that was. Yeah. Has been. And it's not just crying, we do some shouting and singing, and sometimes words don't come. You just express it in other ways.
Yeah.
Mm.
Powerful. So you're teaching the grief composting training now for the first time this year.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it's something that as soon as I saw information about it, I knew I have to do it, absolutely. And I'm just kind of wondering, what sort of people is that training for? Is it for anyone? Is it for people who are already doing work with groups? How would you describe it?
Good, thank you for that. So the grief composting training is for people who have already got a relationship to their own grief in some ways, or to their own that have, it doesn't matter if they haven't held circles actually, because that's part of the training, how to hold circle that is earth-based. It's really very much earth-based, and there's a lot. It's for people who have been, maybe have read a book or have seen a talk or have been inspired and have a glimpse, like I did. This is ancient. We've done that all. Our species have done that all over the earth forever. And they want to bring that into their organizations or their groups or their community or their family. So it is for people that will spread the work.
Yeah.
Somehow into their community. Whatever that means. You know, that might be into something you're already doing. You know, I can imagine people that are doing movement, or people that are doing with refugees, for example. There's something I would love is to have social workers. I would love to have psychologists and psychotherapists and psychiatrists, as well as people that work with rivers and plants and children and elders. You know. So again, the image and the vision I hold is to grow the mycelium of support.
Yeah.
So we can support each other. Because, I don't know about you, Jackie, but I feel in my bones, and many of us feel that it's going to get tough. It's going to get very tough. And to offer containers and spaces for people to be validated and legitimate in how they feel about what's happening to our earth is essential to me. And so is there anything? That's what I've imagined, that's what I see. And some will be in 3 parts, and some will be intensive weekly for a week. The first one is 3 parts in Devon, and they'll be in the UK, and I've already been invited to do it in Holland. We'll see how it grows. And I'm excited to come up north. To thank you, thank you for inviting me.
No, I'm really, everything about this just touches me and feels so resonant, and it's so timely and so needed. And I just love this idea that we can become a world community that is well resourced to meet whatever challenges and changes come, and that we don't shy away and we don't go off separately to deal with our grief, but we come together and we see it as an invitation to restore that sense of belonging on all levels. So I think it's incredibly hopeful and beautiful work that you're offering. So if people want to find out about upcoming dates for the training, on your website on soulland.org, is that the best place to look?
Yes, it's 1L, soulland.org. And there'll be the Soul Land program with all the circles and all the different trainings, different where it's happening, and also the earth art. There's also earth art workshops. It's all there. And there's a blog and also an opportunity to put your name for a newsletter if you want to be kept up to date.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Azul.
Thank you, Jackie. It's beautiful. And see you soon up there.
Yeah, see you soon. For grief composting training in the north, coming soon. So that will be on Azul's website very soon.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Much love.
Much love to you.
Mm.